Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with peach fritters. That's right, we've completely redesigned the classic peach fritter recipe. And instead of just putting chunks of peaches in a plain batter, we're going to put chunks of peaches in a peach batter, which really does change everything. And by the way, if you stop the video because you can't get fresh peaches, you should turn it back on, since this will work with canned or frozen peaches instead. But I do have fresh peaches, so to get started, the first thing we'll do is cut one up. And you don't have to, but I am going to peel this one first. Or if I'm making a pie or a crumble, I usually don't bother. Before a fritter, I think it's better if we just use the flesh. And then once peeled, we'll go ahead and slice that peach off the pit, or stone as some people call it. Speaking of which, if you bought a peach that was a freestone, you can easily pop that pit out, which makes this step easier. But if you're using one with the pit attached, you just have to go around like this, cutting off all that beautiful sweet flesh. And yes, this is probably the one time where we don't want a super sharp knife. So what I'm really saying is be careful. And once we've cut off as much as we can, we'll go ahead and squeeze what's left to get any of the remaining juice. Or I guess we could pop it into our mouth. Or both. Just make sure you do that in the right order. And then once we have those larger pieces cut, we'll go back into the bowl, and we'll cut these up into like half-inch pieces. And in case you're wondering, yes, this would be easier on a cutting board, but there's a really good reason why we're doing everything in the bowl. And that's because we don't even want to waste one drop of this precious peach juice. And if we do it on a cutting board, we're definitely going to lose some. But anyway, one way or another, we want to end up with one heaping cup of cubed up peach. And then what we'll do is take that and sprinkle over some white granulated sugar, and we will take a spoon and give it a thorough mix. And once that is nicely mixed in, what we're going to do is cover this, and we're going to let it sit for at least 30 minutes, during which time that sugar is going to draw out more liquid from the peach, creating basically a fresh peach syrup. And it's this one very simple extra step that really is key to this whole operation. So like I said, we'll let that sit covered for about 30 minutes, at which point if everything has gone according to plan, the bottom of our bowl should look like this. And by this, I mean very syrupy. So that is looking just about perfect, which means we can go ahead and add the rest of the ingredients, which will include a few drops of vanilla extract, the pure and the real, as well as a little bit of freshly grated nutmeg, followed by a very small touch of cinnamon. And it's the vanilla and the nutmeg and the cinnamon that are going to give our fritter a little bit of a donut vibe, but we don't want to overdo it, so we're basically microdosing. And then next up, we will toss in some panko breadcrumbs, which I think are key, although I couldn't tell you exactly what they do, but I can tell you they definitely do something. And then we will finish up with some self-rising flour, or of course some regular all-purpose flour, with the addition of baking powder and a pinch of salt. And of course, as usual, we'll explain in the written recipe how to do that. And then what we'll do is take a spoon and start mixing this. And at first it's going to look very dry, but don't worry, just keep stirring. And after about 30 seconds, it will start looking sticky and start to look more like a batter. But we're not done. Just keep stirring. And another half a minute to a minute later, we're going to end up with something that looks like this. Which, yes, does look like I secretly added some more liquid, but I did not. All right, what that is the sugar and that little bit of salt in the self-rising flour pulling more juices out of the peach, as well as the baking powder in there has been activated, and it's made our batter more voluminous and given it a more fluid texture. And that's it. Once mixed, I like to let the batter sit for about 3 or 4 minutes before spooning it into our hot oil, which yes, you definitely want to get hot while you're making the batter. Okay, this can sit around for a while, but for best results, I do like to fry this about 3 or 4 minutes after we mix it. And you can sort of see why here. All right, this was sitting for about 4 or 5 minutes, and you can see it's beautifully bubbly and very much ready to start dropping rounded tablespoons into our fryer, which, by the way, we're going to do at 375 degrees, Fahrenheit that is. Oh yeah, do not do this to 375 Celsius. But anyway, I'm going to drop in 6 nice big rounded tablespoons. And yes, I am crowding them a little bit, but it's fine. Okay, I'm using a new fryer, which I do like, except the heating element is exposed in the bottom, which means you have to use it with the basket in, which means a little less room to work with. But it was fine, and I did fit all the batter in. And once we do, it's always good to check they're not sticking together, which they usually don't. But if you are going to crowd them like I did, it's good to check. And what we'll do is fry these for about 1.5 minutes before we tip those over to the other side, which is usually very easy, unless you're trying to film it. And then it looks much, much harder than it really is. But anyway, we'll go ahead and carefully flip those over, and then we'll give the second side 1.5 minutes as well. And in a restaurant, after flipping, I would probably take a second basket and push these down into the oil so they're totally submerged. But with this rig, we don't have a second basket. So instead, I will carefully dunk those down in the oil with this fork, just to get a little bit of hot oil going over the top, except I accidentally flipped those two on the end, which I flipped back over. Oh, and by the way, feel free to use tongs for this and not a fork. All right, tongs are twice as long and 10 times safer. And then once that second side is fried for 90 seconds, I flip them over one last time and cook them for 1 more minute, which is a little controversial, since some people think that makes them absorb a little more oil, but I am not concerned. And to those people, I would say, you do realize we're making deep-fried peach fritters, right? But bottom line, as long as these are fried for a total of about 4 minutes at 375, if they're this size, they should be very close to perfect. So we will pull those up out of the oil and give them a little shake and let them drain for a few seconds before we transfer those to a rack to cool. Or you can try to eat these piping hot if you want, but I do not recommend it. All right, I don't think the taste or texture will be as good as if you let these cool down to just warm. And while that was happening, I moved them closer together so that they'd be easier to take pictures of. So I did a few of those, and then I grabbed one and went in for a taste. And that, my friends, might look like some kind of standard regular peach fritter, but it is not. All right, by using that fresh peach syrup instead of milk or buttermilk or whatever to make the batter, we are talking about a fritter that features pure peach goodness. All right, it really does make a huge difference. And besides the taste, the texture was incredible. Right, kind of crispy and crusty on the outside, but very soft and tender on the inside, and not at all dense. So this really did have, as our bread-making friends like to say, a great crumb. And while these are more than okay to eat as is, my favorite way to enjoy would be to serve a few of these up with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. And they say if you rub the scoop in your palm like this, it will melt the surface, and you will get a beautiful, perfectly smooth scoop. Except it did not work. And all I really accomplished was getting a very cold palm. And then to finish mine off and shine them up a little bit, I went ahead and drizzled over a little bit of bourbon whiskey simple syrup. And of course, I'll give you the ingredients and steps for that in the written recipe. But it's nothing more than bourbon, water, and sugar that we bring to a boil and let cool. And if that doesn't sound like your thing, you could simply toss these in sugar or a cinnamon sugar. So that's going to be up to you. I mean, you guys are, after all, the Steve Kerrs of your peach fritters. But anyway, I finished up with a sprig of mint to distract people from my not smooth ice cream. And I went ahead and took a few more pictures. And yes, I did swirl the top of that scoop with my fingertip, since it really was bugging me. But I quickly lost interest in taking pictures. So I found a spoon and lost the mint, and I dug in for the official taste. And if there's a better combination than a freshly fried peach fritter and vanilla ice cream, I would like to know about it. Because this really is spectacular. And by using that fresh peach syrup we made as the liquid in this, instead of things like milk or buttermilk and or egg, we have a peach fritter that tastes much, much peachier. And when I first started working on this recipe, I was going to be more than happy to sacrifice a little bit of texture for extra peachy flavor. But as it turns out, I think the texture is actually better. So not involving any dairy or using any egg was not in any way a disadvantage. And it's always a great feeling when we can simplify a recipe and make it better at the same time. And as I mentioned, if you don't have fresh peaches, you could still do this. Or you can thaw some frozen peaches and cut them up just the same, and then macerate them with that sugar and proceed as shown. And if you end up using canned peaches, you don't have to do anything. Right? Just cut the peaches into the same size, and then simply add about 3 or 4 tablespoons of this syrup. Of course, having said that, if it is summer and you can get fresh peaches, it is kind of crazy not to use them. But whether you end up using canned, frozen, or fresh, I think these are going to be some of the best fruit fritters you've ever had, which is why I really do hope you give them a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.